Many First Nations in Manitoba don't have their own police force. Often the first people to respond to a crisis in the community are volunteers. One such volunteer died in the tragedy in James Smith Cree Nation in Saskatchewan recently. Now, as the CBC's Stephanie Cram explains, many First Nations here are reconsidering how they respond to crises.
Lydia Gloria Burns was one of the 10 victims in the James Smith Cree Nation tragedy. She was a crisis worker responding to a call. Her death highlights the lack of protective services on First Nations. Minegoziibe Anishinabe Chief Derek Nepinak sees parallels in his northern Manitoba community. They have a volunteer crisis team who handles calls. It means Nepinak is rethinking who responds first.
They're going into volatile situations at times without the adequate resources to, not only to intervene in the issue, but to even protect themselves from potential harm.
Manitoba ranks the second worst province in Canada for First Nations with a police force. According to the province, 18 of the 63 First Nations in Manitoba have an independent police force. 8 communities are served by the Manitoba First Nations Police Service. Another 10 have First Nations policing agreements with the federal and provincial governments.
The idea of having an external force like the RCMP or the Ontario Police, provincial police come in and do policing in our communities, I think is quite opposite of the direction of self-government and self-determination that we're going for.
Bellegarde, who has worked for a Saskatchewan First Nations Police Board for over 20 years, says that Indigenous-run police forces are better suited to communities.
We have unique cultures, we have unique governance systems, we have unique languages, and we have our people, I think, deserve to be looked after by our own people.
In 2015, the province launched the First Nations Safety Officer Program in order to fill the gap in protective services on reserve. Safety officers have similar roles to peace officers. Chief Nepinak says the program is insufficient.
Community safety officers are essentially what I call glorified security guard. They're mandated to observe and report, and in emergency situations, call in the RCMP.
Derek Nepinak cautions that communities like his need more than just policing. They also need access to mental health and addiction services. Even communities with First Nations police forces say there are gaps. For example, in Swan Lake First Nation, there's a police force but no detachment. Stephanie Cram, CBC News, Winnipeg.